An empty town, a hidden life, the woman who'd never seen another man. The telegram arrived on a wind-blown March afternoon, folded into a brown envelope so brittle it felt as though it might crumble in his hands. Sam Carver had been mending fences on the edge of a cattle lease in New Mexico when the boy rode out from the depot with it. He had no family left that he knew of, no debts except to himself, and no prospects beyond the next month's pay. The words on the paper made him stop in the middle of the pasture and stare. Estate of Albert Carver, claimant Samuel J. Carver. Property located at Reclamation Township No. 14, known locally as Hollow Creek. He read it twice. Hollow Creek. The name stirred a faint memory from childhood stories, a mining town his uncle had drifted to in the Silver Rush, then vanished from all letters. Sam had thought him dead decades ago. Now here was a legal claim, a deed to something out on the far edge of the map. No details, only coordinates and a stamp from a courthouse clerk. The men at the bunkhouse laughed when he told them. Hollow Creek, one said. That's nothing but sand and ghosts. Another muttered about a fire, a cave-in the town abandoned overnight. Sam listened, said nothing, and ran his thumb over the seal on the telegram. A ghost town wasn't much, but it was more than a fence line that didn't belong to him. 2 days later he quit his job, sold his saddle horse for supplies, and bought a scrawny Mustang to carry him north. He packed flour, coffee, a bedroll, and his uncle's old compass. As he rode out across the desert, the land grew lonelier, the sky wider. Fences disappeared, then wagon ruts, until even the wind sounded empty. For a week he followed dry riverbeds and low mesas. He passed through settlements that seemed to shrink as he approached, their windows shuttered, their stores barely stocked. Every night by the fire he unfolded the map and traced the faint line to Hollow Creek. He imagined a few stone foundations, a rusted sign. He told himself he'd sell whatever timber or scrap he could haul and move on. But a part of him, the part that had grown up on his mother's stories of wide-open places, felt a strange pull toward this unknown inheritance. On the 8th day, just before dusk, he saw the town. It lay in a shallow bowl between two ridges, buildings leaning but still standing, false fronts casting long shadows. From a distance, it looked like a stage set forgotten by actors. Sam rode down the slope slowly, his horse's hooves muffled in the sand. The street was lined with a saloon, a boarding house, a blacksmith shop, all dusty but intact. A sign creaked on rusted chains, Hollow Creek. He dismounted in the middle of the street. The silence was so deep he could hear the ticking of his own watch. Doors hung closed, windows unbroken. Here and there lay tools as though someone had just set them down. A hammer on a porch rail, a tin cup beside a well. He saw no livestock, no smoke, no footprints in the dust but his own. Yet the place did not feel dead. It felt as though it were holding its breath. Sam took a few steps toward the boarding house. A curtain shifted in an upstairs window. He froze. For a heartbeat he was sure he had imagined it. Then the fabric stilled again, leaving only a rectangle of fading light. He turned in a slow circle, scanning the silent town. Hollow Creek was supposed to be empty, but something or someone was still here. The telegram, the long ride, the empty buildings, all of it had been leading to this moment. Sam felt the hair rise on the back of his neck. He had inherited more than a ghost town. He had inherited a mystery. The following morning, Sam woke on the floor of the old sheriff's office, the smell of dry timber and dust in his nose. He had rolled out his bedroll there because it was the only building with a door that still latched. Outside, Hollow Creek lay under a thin, pale dawn, its false-fronted buildings casting long, crooked shadows like sundials stuck on some forgotten hour. He stepped into the street with his coffee tin and a wary glance at the windows. Nothing moved but a tumble of sage. Yet the town did not feel abandoned in the way of other ghost towns he'd passed. It felt suspended, as if everyone had simply stepped away for a moment and forgotten to return. Sam walked slowly, noticing details he had missed in the twilight. The general store shelves were still lined with canned peaches and sacks of flour, their labels faded but intact. In the saloon, chairs sat pushed back from tables, one of them with cards still spread mid-hand. The piano was covered with a yellowed sheet but had no dust on its keys. He found a barrel of water at the back of the livery, half full and fresh enough to drink. The more he looked, the less sense it made. Ghost towns decay, but Hollow Creek had been cared for. Roof shingles patched, hinges oiled, even the church bell rope coiled neatly on a hook. Someone had been tending this place, maybe even living here. But where were they now? He began to map the layout in his head. Boarding house on the north side, saloon across from it, blacksmith shop at the far end, and behind that, a row of small houses. The tracks of the old narrow-gauge railway cut off to the east, buried under drifts of sand. Every few minutes he thought he heard a door close softly or a faint footstep, but when he turned, there was only silence. At midday he found the first undeniable sign of life. A garden behind the boarding house, neat rows of beans and squash under an improvised trellis of wagon wheels. The soil was damp from a recent watering. A pair of small boots sat by the door. He crouched, brushing his fingers over the leaves. Whoever lived here wasn't just scavenging. They were growing, planning, sustaining. The idea of a person surviving alone out here for years both fascinated and unsettled him. Sam decided not to force a confrontation. Instead, he left a small offering, a tin of coffee and a folded note on the porch rail. "I'm not here to harm you. I inherited this town. My name is Sam Carver. Please talk to me." He weighted it with a stone and stepped back, scanning the windows above. Nothing moved. To give them space, he spent the afternoon exploring the outskirts. He followed a path behind the livery up to a ridge where a rusted windmill still creaked faintly in the breeze. From there, he could see the whole town laid out like a child's model, a dozen buildings huddled against the sand. He also saw smoke, thin gray, rising from a chimney he hadn't noticed before at the far edge of town, near the old schoolhouse. Sam felt a jolt of adrenaline. Whoever was here wasn't hiding completely. They were cooking, heating, living. He thought of the curtain shifting the night before and the boots by the door. A picture began to form, but it was still blurred at the edges. By the time he returned to the sheriff's office, the sun was going down. The note and coffee tin were gone. In their place sat a different object, a small tin cup of water and a sprig of sage laid carefully on top as if in answer. Sam stared at it for a long time. He was no longer alone in Hollow Creek. The ghost town had spoken back. Night fell quickly in Hollow Creek. Sam lit a lantern and set it in the window of the sheriff's office, hoping its glow might be seen as a signal rather than a threat. The tin cup and sprig of sage still sat on his desk. Whoever had left it had been close enough to watch him, but silent enough to escape notice. He ate a simple meal of beans, then decided to take another walk through town before turning in. The moon was bright enough to silver the rooftops and the sand between the buildings. From somewhere far off came the call of a coyote. Everything else was still. He started at the saloon and worked his way up the street. Each doorway seemed to breathe a different kind of memory. Laughter, arguments, the clatter of boots. At the far end, he reached the boarding house again. The curtain that had twitched the first night was drawn tight now. He hesitated, then knocked lightly on the doorframe. "I'm Sam Carver," he said into the quiet. "I don't mean you harm." No answer. Only the faint smell of wood smoke drifting from somewhere inside. He turned to go, and that was when he saw her. A pale face, framed by dark hair, appeared at an upstairs window, just for a second. The eyes were wide, not with fear exactly, but with an animal alertness. She seemed younger than he had imagined, though the lamplight from behind her cast her features into shadow. Then the curtain fell back into place and she was gone. Sam stood in the street for a long moment, heart thumping. He had not been imagining it. There was indeed someone here, and she was real enough to leave water, sage, and footprints. But seeing her changed something. The mystery was no longer an abstract puzzle. It was a person. He walked back to the sheriff's office with a strange mixture of protectiveness and caution. Whoever she was, she had survived alone in a place most people wouldn't dare spend a night. She would have her own reasons for hiding, and barging in could shatter whatever fragile trust she might be feeling. Inside, he sat down and wrote another note on the back of an old wanted poster. "Thank you for the water. I would like to meet you. I will wait by the well at noon tomorrow. Sam." He folded it and slipped out quietly. Under the moonlight, he left it on the boarding house porch beside the empty tin cup. Back in his bedroll, he lay awake listening to the town's silence. Every creak of timber or whisper of wind seemed to hold a message. He wondered how long she had been here, how she had come to Hollow Creek. Raised by a parent? Left behind? Did she know about the world beyond the ridges at all? He found himself rehearsing what he would say to her, how to explain his sudden arrival. When he woke at dawn, the note was gone. In its place lay a different reply, a single piece of chalk, the kind used in classrooms, and a small arrow drawn in white on the porch boards pointing toward the old schoolhouse at the edge of town. Sam held the chalk between his fingers. It was a message, an invitation, or a test. Either way, it meant she was watching him and wanted him to follow, but on her terms. He slipped the chalk into his pocket and felt a curious steadiness settle over him. He had inherited a ghost town and found a hidden life inside it. Now at last he had a direction to walk. The sun had barely cleared the eastern ridge when Sam followed the white arrow. The old schoolhouse sat on the far edge of Hollow Creek, its clapboard walls sun-bleached, its bell tower leaning slightly but still upright. A line of chalk arrows led him from the boarding house porch across the street and around the back of the building. He moved slowly, not wanting to spook whoever was guiding him. It was clear she was setting the pace of this encounter. Each arrow was small, precise, pointing unambiguously forward. The last one ended at a door he hadn't noticed before. A narrow side entrance partly hidden by a stack of firewood. Sam tapped lightly on the wood. "It's me, Sam Carver. You left me the chalk." Silence. Then very faintly the sound of a bolt sliding back. The door opened just enough to reveal a sliver of darkness inside. He hesitated but stepped in, ducking his head under the low lintel. The door closed behind him, plunging him into cool dimness. The interior smelled of old books, beeswax, and herbs. Windows were covered with heavy cloth to keep out the light. As his eyes adjusted, he saw shelves lined with jars, bundles of dried plants, and stacks of worn school primers. A small table sat in the center, set with a cup of water and a single chair. On the blackboard, written in large, careful letters, were the words, "Please sit. I can hear you, but do not look at me yet." Sam read it twice, then lowered himself into the chair. "All right," he said quietly. "I'm sitting." From somewhere behind the blackboard came a soft rustle. A young woman's voice spoke, hesitant but clear. "You are not like the others." "I'm not sure who the others are," Sam answered. "I came because this town was left to me." "I didn't know anyone was here." More silence. Then, "My name is Mara." The name hung in the dim room like a fragile thread. Sam repeated it gently. "Mara, you shouldn't stay," she said. "They always come." Sam leaned forward. "Who comes?" But she didn't answer that. Instead, she asked, "Where is your horse?" "By the well," he said. "Why?" "You left him saddled." "That's good. You may need to leave quickly." He felt a prickle at the back of his neck. "Mara, I don't want to leave you here alone." "If there's danger, I know how to hide," she said. Her tone wasn't frightened but matter-of-fact. "I have always hidden, since my father died." That explained part of it. He kept his voice gentle. "How long have you been here, Mara?" "All my life," she said after a pause. "I've never been beyond the ridges." Sam exhaled slowly. That meant more than isolation. It meant no friends, no neighbors, no other faces. Yet she was literate, articulate, clearly resourceful. She had built a life out of scraps. "I'm not here to take anything from you," he said. "If anything, I'd like to help." Another rustle, then a small square parcel slid out from behind the blackboard toward him. It was a notebook tied with string. "If you want to help," she said, "read this. It will tell you why Hollow Creek is not safe." Sam picked up the notebook, feeling the weight of it. More than paper, it felt like a key. "I'll read it," he promised. "Good," Mara said. "When you're done, meet me at the garden at sundown. But come alone." Then the door at the back of the room opened and closed before he could move. He was alone in the schoolhouse, holding the notebook of a woman who had never seen another man. Sam spent the rest of the day in the shade of the sheriff's office reading Mara's notebook. It was more like a journal than a warning. Short entries written in a neat, deliberate hand describing storms, planting schedules, old mining maps, and a handful of stories about her father. Toward the back, the tone shifted. She wrote about men who came from outside, treasure seekers, claim jumpers, and scavengers. Sometimes they stayed a night, sometimes a week, always looking for silver or relics, never suspecting she was here. Twice she had been forced to hide for days in the hills until they left. One entry caught him. "Father said we must never show ourselves. They would take me. They would not understand. I do not know if he meant harm or simply the world." Sam closed the book and sat for a long time with his hands over his mouth. The fear in those lines was palpable, but so was the isolation. She had been a child when she wrote some of them. She had never had a choice about any of this. By the time the sun began to slide toward the ridges, he had decided on one thing. When he saw her, he would go slowly, speak gently, and let her choose how much to reveal. This was her home. He was the intruder. At dusk, he walked to the garden behind the boarding house. The beans and squash glowed faintly in the last light, leaves trembling in a breeze. He waited by the fence, hands loose at his sides. A movement among the rows caught his eye. Mara rose from a crouch near the far trellis, straightening slowly like a deer testing the air. In the fading sun, he could see her more clearly than before. Long dark hair braided over one shoulder, a plain calico dress patched at the elbows, bare feet dusty from the soil. She held a small spade like a talisman rather than a weapon. For a few heartbeats, neither of them moved. Then Sam inclined his head slightly. "Hello, Mara," he said softly. She stayed where she was but answered, "You read the notebook?" "Yes," he said. "I read it all." "Then you know why you should go." "I know why you're afraid," he said. "But I'm not here to take anything from you. This is your home. I'm only trying to understand." Her eyes flicked to the horizon as if expecting someone. "Most men do not ask before they take." Sam spread his hands. "Then maybe I'm not like most men." The corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but something near curiosity. She stepped closer, one slow pace, still gripping the spade. "Why did you come here?" "It was left to me," he said. "I thought it was empty. I thought it was just a piece of land. But I found you instead." Mara tilted her head, studying him as though measuring truth. "You don't look like a prospector." "I'm not. I've been working ranches. This is the first thing I've ever owned." Another pause. Then she said, "My father told me never to speak to a stranger. But you left coffee. And you waited," he nodded. "I'll keep waiting if that's what you want. You get to decide." Something in his tone must have reassured her. She lowered the spade a fraction and came close enough that he could see the pale line of sunburn across her collarbone and the faint ink smudges on her fingers from writing. She smelled faintly of sage and dust. "I don't know what happens now," she admitted. "Neither do I," Sam said. "But maybe you don't have to be alone anymore." Mara looked down at the garden soil between them, then back up at him. For the first time, her voice lost its wariness. "You're very different," she murmured. Sam gave a small, steady smile. "So are you." They stood there as the sky deepened to purple. Two strangers in a garden that had kept a ghost town alive. The silence between them no longer a wall but a fragile bridge. The next days in Hollow Creek were different. The curtain of secrecy had been drawn back just enough for Sam to glimpse Mara's world, and now she allowed him small, tentative visits. He never entered a room without her permission. Sometimes they met in the garden, other times on the porch of the schoolhouse where she liked to sit at dusk, sketching mountains with a piece of chalk. Mara was cautious but curious. She asked questions in bursts like stones skipping over water. "What is a train like? What does a city smell like? Do children go to school every day?" Sam tried to answer plainly without overwhelming her, telling her about cattle drives, steam engines, music halls, and telegraph wires. Her eyes widened at some descriptions, narrowed at others. "You make the world sound too big to hold," she said one evening. "It is big," Sam replied. "But it isn't all bad." She gave a little shrug. "Father said the world outside is dangerous." "That it takes more than it gives." Sam studied her. "It can, but it can also give back. Friends, work, freedom, choice." The last word seemed to make her pause. Choice was not something she'd had much of. He noticed how resourceful she was. She had a rain catchment system on the schoolhouse roof, jars of dried beans labeled in a neat hand, a hidden root cellar lined with tallow candles. She knew how to mend clothes, set snares, even bind wounds with herbs. Yet there were basic things she didn't know. Paper money, letters, the way law and property worked. She'd grown up in a world that was at once self-sufficient and fragile. Sometimes Sam felt like a visitor to another country, and sometimes like a teacher. But mostly he felt like a guest in her life, and he tried to treat it that way. On the third morning, he saddled his Mustang and took her on a short walk outside town. She had never been beyond the low ridge. He kept his voice easy. "We'll just go to the top and back. You can see a long way from there." Mara hesitated but nodded. She moved carefully, holding her skirts so they wouldn't snag on cactus. At the crest, she stopped and caught her breath. The horizon rolled away in all directions. dotted with mesas and silver ribbons of dry creek beds. A hawk wheeled overhead. "It's endless," she whispered. Sam smiled. "That's just a small piece." For a long moment she simply stared as though trying to drink it all in. Then she turned to him. "How do you live in something so big?" "Same way you've lived here," he said. "One step at a time. You learn the paths. You find good people." She looked back at the town, a collection of silent roofs in a hollow of sand. "I only know ghosts and echoes. Now you know me," Sam said quietly. The words hung between them, not as a claim but as an offering. She glanced at him, then away, as if unused to being looked at without demand. They walked back down the ridge in silence. Near the garden, Mara stopped him. "If you stay," she said slowly, "people will come. They always come. They will see me. They will not ask what I want." Sam heard the edge of fear in her voice and felt a knot tighten in his chest. "Then we'll make a plan," he said. "You'll decide what happens next, not them. Not even me. You." For the first time, a real smile flickered across her face. Quick, uncertain, but there. "Maybe," she said softly. They reached the garden as the sky burned orange. The ghost town no longer felt like a sealed box. It felt like a fragile world in motion. Two lives slowly overlapping, each one testing the other's edges. Worlds were colliding, but gently, as if both wanted to see what could be built from the collision. 3 days after their walk to the ridge, the first sign of trouble arrived on the wind, the sound of hooves. Sam heard it before Mara did. He was repairing the porch rail of the sheriff's office while she was tending to her garden. In the stillness of Hollow Creek, even a distant rider carried like a drumbeat. He crossed the street quickly. "Mara," he said softly. "We've got company." Her head snapped up. The color drained from her face. "How many?" "2 riders, maybe 3, Sam said, scanning the ridge. "Coming from the south. They're moving slow, like they're looking." She dropped her trowel, wiping her hands on her dress. "They always come," she whispered. "Treasure seekers," claimed jumpers. "Father warned me." Sam laid a hand on the fence between them. "Listen to me. You don't have to run this time. We'll think it through." But Mara was already moving toward the schoolhouse, gathering her few essentials with quick, practiced motions. He realized she had done this before, probably more times than she'd written about. Hiding was muscle memory for her. Sam followed, speaking calmly. "You have choices now, Mara. You can hide if you want. Or we can face them together. It's your call." She hesitated at the door, breathing hard. For a moment she looked younger than she was, torn between instinct and something new. "If they see me, then I'll make sure they don't," Sam said. "But I'm not letting them take this place from you." Finally she nodded. "All right. I'll stay hidden in the schoolhouse. But you—" She swallowed. "Be careful." Sam gave a small nod. "Always." He saddled his Mustang and rode out to meet the strangers before they could enter the town. As he crested the ridge, he saw them clearly. 2 men on tired horses, eyes scanning the valley. Their gear was rough, their rifles slung carelessly but within easy reach. Sam kept his hands visible. "Afternoon," he called. "This is private property." One of the men squinted at him. "You Sam Carver?" "Depends who's asking." "We heard the Carver place was abandoned. Heard there's silver left in the mines. Thought we'd take a look." "There's nothing here for you," Sam said evenly. "Turn around and ride back," the other man spat into the dust. "Funny, you look like one man sitting on a whole town. Could be you're hiding something worth having." Sam felt his muscles tighten but kept his voice steady. "Only thing I'm hiding is dust and broken boards." "You're welcome to see the mine entrance yourself. It's caved in." They exchanged a look. One shifted in his saddle as if about to push past him. Sam slid his rifle out of its scabbard with deliberate slowness. "I said turn around." Something in his tone made them pause. After a tense moment, the first man tipped his hat with mock courtesy. "No need for trouble, friend. We'll be on our way." Sam kept his rifle at his side until they disappeared over the southern ridge. Only then did he exhale, realizing how hard his heart was pounding. Back in town, Mara emerged from the schoolhouse doorway like a shadow. "They're gone? For now," Sam said. She looked at him differently. Not just as a stranger, but as someone who had stood between her and the outside world. "They'll tell others," she murmured. "More will come." "Then we'll be ready," Sam said. "Next time we won't just react. We'll have a plan." For the first time, she didn't retreat immediately. She stepped out into the open street, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the riders had vanished. "I don't want to run anymore," she said quietly. Sam nodded. "Then we won't." The ghost town was no longer just a hiding place. It was about to become a battleground, or if they were careful, a new beginning forged under pressure. The morning after the riders left, Hollow Creek felt changed. The air still smelled of sage and dust, but the silence had a new edge, as if the town itself knew eyes were on it. Sam awoke before dawn and walked the length of the main street. Every doorway, every shuttered window felt like a question he had to answer. Mara was already outside, gathering herbs near the old saloon. The shawl around her shoulders fluttered in the breeze. She looked up when she saw him. "Couldn't sleep?" "Not much," Sam admitted. "Kept thinking about what you said yesterday." "You don't want to run anymore," she straightened. "I don't, I'm tired of hiding." He nodded slowly. "Then we'll make this place ours. Not just a ghost town you're trapped in, a home. If outsiders come, they'll see it's lived in," claimed. "They won't find a frightened girl, they'll find a woman standing her ground." Mara's eyes flickered, part fear, part wonder. "I've never thought of it like that." "That's because nobody's been here to stand with you," Sam said gently. Over the next days, they began working side by side. Sam fixed the fences and hung a new sign at the town entrance reading "Private Property, Carver and Company" in bold paint. Mara cleaned the schoolhouse and unlocked other buildings she'd left shuttered for years. They moved supplies into the open, repaired windows, and stacked firewood where travelers could see it from the road. Everything about the town now said, "Someone lives here." At night, under the oil lamp in the sheriff's office, Sam showed Mara how to read a map and how land titles worked. "This deed is yours as much as mine," he told her. "If anyone asks, you're not a secret. You're a partner." Mara traced her finger over the paper, over letters she was still learning to decipher. "I don't know the world," she whispered, "but I want to learn." "That's all it takes," Sam said. Their days settled into a rhythm. Sometimes they laughed over simple things, how she'd never eaten peaches from a can, how she could trap a rabbit faster than he could draw his revolver. Sometimes they sat in silence on the porch of the schoolhouse, watching the sky bleed orange and purple over the mesas, but always there was the sense of a clock ticking, of writers somewhere out there spreading word of a town with secrets. They built quietly but prepared quietly too. Sam reinforced doors. Mara gathered herbs that could act as smoke signals if they needed help. One evening, as they finished fencing the garden, Mara leaned on the post driver and looked at Sam. "If they come again, we'll face them together," he said, her eyes softened. "I'm not a prisoner anymore," she said. "I'm not a ghost." "No," Sam said. "You're the reason this place is alive." She stepped closer, dirt on her hands, sun in her hair. "You changed everything," she said softly. "I think you changed me first," he answered. For a long moment they stood there, two people who had begun as strangers at opposite ends of a forgotten town, now partners building something that belonged to neither the past nor the outsiders but to themselves. Beyond the ridge, the world was still large and uncertain, but Hollow Creek was no longer a hidden cage. It had become a living place, rooted by the quiet courage of a woman who had never seen another man, and the steady patience of one who refused to treat her like a prize. As twilight fell, Mara glanced at the sign at the town entrance and gave a small, sure nod. "This is home now," she said. Sam tipped his hat. "Home," he agreed, and for the first time the ghost town did not feel empty at all.